And joining me is Dr. Shane Robbins, who's the superintendent of Kershaw County. Really appreciate Dr. Robbins you joining us today. I think this is a really interesting event in terms of the kind of impact, really the first I've seen going on surveys of a school being hit like this. I think we got a lot of lessons learned out of this, to be honest with you. So I am going to start just giving an overview of the event. Then we're going to show you some videos and pictures from the storm survey and surveillance camera and drone images, and that's really interesting. And Dr. Robbins will be here to help kind of comment on some of that, and then he's going to speak on their response to it and challenges that they face. So let's go ahead and get started. So again, this is the North Central High School tornado. This tornado struck on, oh, and by the way, sorry, Chris or someone else on my staff, if you guys could monitor my time for me and pop up if I'm running a little bit behind here. I'm supposed to be about 30 minutes. I'm going to try to cut that a little bit shorter, and Dr. Robbins has about 20 minutes after me, and we hope to get some questions in here as well. So yeah, one of my staff members could pop in if I'm running late, let me know. But anyway, this is a summary, the Saturday, January 11th, 2020. This tornado struck at 10:33 at night. It was late evening, so fortunately school was not ending. It was obviously nighttime and on a weekend. Very, very fortunate there. The duration of this tornado was less than 2 minutes. I think we figured about a minute and a half that it was on the ground essentially from when it touched down on the southwest side of the school to lifted on the northeast side of the campus. We rated it an EF2 tornado with maximum wind speeds of 130 miles per hour. The path length was just over a half mile long. It was not on the ground long, especially considering it produced EF2 damage. And the path was about 150 yards. And you'll see here on this image on the right, this is the track that we had drawn out. You'll see the yellow line and all these points are some of the different indicators that we looked at to determine the strength of the wind speeds there. So really, it touched down just southwest of campus, went through, as we'll see in video here, the football field turned, went right across the high school, right through the campus, and then lifted just off to the northeast. There's a clearing in the field here, not exactly how far out extended from there, but really hit the school. If this would have been, a quarter or half mile west or east, we may not even have ever noticed this tornado touch down or had any reports. It would have been a real, not populated rural areas with a lot of trees. So it really just was unfortunate, struck in the worst possible spot there. So I want to go over just a quick overview of the radars and warnings, the radar imagery and warnings. So we did issue a severe thunderstorm warning. So again, the time that it struck was 10:33 p.m. We issued a severe thunderstorm warning for this line of severe thunderstorms that was moving through about 9:58 p.m. that evening, about 35 minutes before the tornado actually struck the school. There was no tornado warning issued for this event. And I'll show you here in a little bit, a couple of slides, why it was so challenging. But, when we have lines of these storms coming through, not individual supercells, let's say, we find that warnings are a little more challenging. They can produce tornadoes, but they tend to be very short-lived and not very easy to see on radar compared to some of the larger tornadoes that we might experience, like the ones we did back in April that Kendrick discussed. So, this is one of those events that, unfortunately, we just didn't have a tornado warning out. But we did have a severe thunderstorm warning. We knew the potential was there. We always try to learn from these things, and you can see the text of the warning here on the right. And it was a pretty large severe thunderstorm warning area. We had a lot of reports of trees down with this whole event as this line of storms moved all across mostly the central and northern Midlands of South Carolina. Going on to the next slide is the radar imagery here, and you'll see the little red dot, and I kind of circled it. That's the location of North Central High School. And what you're seeing on the upper left here is reflectivity, so the intensity of the rainfall. And you can see really it's a line of storms. And when you start getting to these bends and curves in a line, that gets us a little bit concerned sometimes that these are the areas that tend to be a little bit more favorable for either strong damaging winds or for quick spin-ups of tornadoes like we saw here. If you look on the bottom right, it's that velocity image we look at to show wind speed, so winds coming toward and away from the radar. And you can see the bright reds and some greens right next to each other. It does indicate there was certainly some rotation there. It was fairly strong, but we had a lot of other indicators and other parts of the area that looked even stronger and more significant than this that produced no damage at all. So I'll show you that here on the next slide. On the bottom left here is one of the indicators we look at to try to see potential for tornadoes forming. Once that value gets up into the reds, it might be an indication that it's something we want to kind of keep an eye on. But, you know, it wasn't an obvious case that there was a tornado about to touch down there. And when you consider it was only on the ground for less than 2 minutes, our radar scans take longer than 2 minutes. So it's something that's very easy to miss on radar, these very short-lived tornadoes, unfortunately. And just to give you an example, here's 2 other storms. These were actually tornado warned at some point earlier that evening and produced no damage and had much greater rotation. So here, back to the west, you can see a little kink in the line. You can see here, really tight couplet. Velocity shows some strong winds toward and away from the radar. That storm a few minutes later, the office issued a tornado warning on it. Again, you can see a little bit hook here on the reflectivity, a good indication that there might be a tornado developing. That value we look for over 1 is certainly showing the potential there for tornadoes. You can still see some very good rotation. This looked much better, and we had about 4 or 5 other areas along that line that looked similar to this in that event and didn't produce any tornadoes. So we always run into the issue. We don't want to issue too many tornado warnings and have the cry wolf syndrome and people don't take action. So we tend to be fairly conservative in our tornado warnings for that reason. We don't want to people just become complacent when they see these warnings. Unfortunately, for some of these real short-lived tornadoes, it might mean it's something we just unfortunately don't get the tornado warning out for. But again, this is something we need to message to the public. When there's a severe thunderstorm warning, you need to be sheltered in a safe location because these storms can easily produce tornadoes sometimes with very short or little or no notice. We always look back as an office and try to find some lessons learned. And for us, I don't know if a tornado warning, for certain we should have had one out. Obviously it was a tornado, but what could we do differently? And maybe in our severe thunderstorm warnings, we could put tornado possible tag in there for these kind of situations where we see there might be some indication that a tornado might briefly spin up somewhere. So again, we always go back and reassess, but we're very fortunate that this tornado did not strike when school was in and students were in that building, as you'll see in these videos coming up. So I am going to go over to the video now, and so I pretty much put together a compilation of drone footage that was obtained from by the school district. There's school surveillance cameras and some of our storm survey pictures. So I'm just going to play through this and speak over. And Dr. Robbins, if you have things you want to point out as we go through this, feel free to speak up again. Just want to give thanks. That kind of went a little bit fast there, but a little thanks to Kershaw County School District for providing us with a lot of the surveillance videos and drone footage. Jeff Cooper was the one that was flying the drone up there and provided a lot of that video. And we had our own survey teams out there in the field looking at the damage. So let's go ahead and get started. First, we're going to start looking by the football field and kind of work our way northeast through the campus. So here you can see where the tornado really started to produce some significant damage right here to the bleachers at the football field. You'll see essentially the concrete stand collapsed. The press box was torn apart. What we think really happened here, the wind kind of got in from the back end of the bleachers and probably lifted up the stands a bit and caused the support essentially to fall out underneath that and destroy the bleachers there pretty good. So you can see quite a bit of damage to those concrete bleachers and the wood press box that was located there. And there you can see from the back end how the supports kind of just gave way and the whole thing just collapsed on the back side. There was a scoreboard that got twisted and bent down. So here was one of the sheds or garages that's used to keep some of their maintenance equipment in. And this is a great example because a lot of times in homes and everything else, when we see tornado damage, the garage door is one of the greatest points of failure. That's where the wind is able to get in and produce a lot of damage to a structure. The garage door is typically the weakest link in a home. We actually saw that, if everyone's been paying attention to that deadly tornado outbreak there in Brunswick County in North Carolina last week. Several of the homes had the garage doors pushed in, and the force of that wind and the pressure difference essentially caused the whole back of the house to collapse, and a lot of that was due to garage door failure. So we saw that here as well. And then moving along, I'm going to take a look now as it gets closer to the gymnasium. It's, we're getting in closer to the school. So here you see, I believe these are restrooms. You can see some of the brick broken off that. You see a lot of debris thrown around. We're looking at here is the fairly newly built gymnasium. Dr. Robbins, do you remember when the newer additions to the school were built?
Yeah, the new additions were built in 2008.
Okay, thank you. It's about 12 years old. How old is the school itself, the rest of the building?
So there were two other components to the school. There was a component that was built, the main instructional area was built in 1979. And then as you fly the drone footage over and you get towards the rear of the building, that was built in 1995 when they consolidated some of the middle schools into one middle school at North Central.
Thank you. Yep, so you'll see the difference in construction, how it kind of withstood the force of the tornado here. So we're flying over right here. What you're seeing is the newer gymnasium right back here in the lower part of the screen now. And the HVAC units were all torn off the roof of that. You can see all four of the units were completely destroyed, and one was actually blown off the side of the building here, which you'll see in a bit. And I think this is going to pause here shortly. And here's inside of the gymnasium again. You'll see the four large holes. The floor was covered in water. All the water kind of leaked in. Overall, though, the newer part of the school certainly held up fairly well to this tornado. Here you can see one of the HVAC units that was blown off to the side. These are real heavy units. Again, here's the front of the gymnasium. You can see all the debris there. But for the most part, it withstood the force of the tornado fairly well. You know, the structure itself, other than the HVAC units. Here you can see some of the damage in front of the gymnasium. So here's some surveillance footage. Again, it's at night, so you're not going to see a tremendous amount, but you certainly see the wind starting to increase in speed here. And one of the biggest things with tornadoes, it's the debris that causes a lot of problems, and is one of the biggest issues that you have to be concerned with, is all this blowing debris as the winds really start to pick up.
John, just make note of that, because what you're seeing right now is something that I'm going to share in terms of lessons learned.
Great, thanks, yep. And you'll see just like that, it's over. A few minutes, strong winds, a lot of debris, not even a few minutes, you know, we're talking less than a minute where all that damage really occurred here in front of the gymnasium. So the doors were blown open. Now we're going to go to footage from inside the gymnasium. I'll leave here in a second. Here we go. So here's one of the entryways, and you'll see the wind outside. If you look at the window to the left, you'll see the wind starting to pick up, certainly. You'll notice some shaking. And you see the door blew open there on the left. The metal detectors, you know, were knocked down. But here the structure itself was fairly well intact. The doors were probably the biggest point of failure. The windows actually did fairly good here. I'm going to see that later on as well in the auditorium. These windows in the newer constructed part of the school, double pane, seem to be extra reinforced and provide some protection. So I want to stop here for, oops, I didn't mean to do that though. Find where we are. Sorry, I keep talking about these glitches. Here we go. So I want to point out on this map here, if I could find where I was, some different parts of the school that we're about to look at. So we're going to go to the front entrance now. So okay, here's an overview of the school. So the gymnasium's back here on the lower right, just off the screen. The tornado essentially went right to the northwest, right through the school. You can actually see the path right through here where the tornado crossed. So what we're going to look at first is the front office area. So here's the main office for the school, and here's the front office. This is going to be kind of the first area that we look at for some of the damage, and then we'll kind of progress along through the school here. So you can see the drone footage now. Here's kind of the main entryway right here, essentially right where the tornado crossed. Right here, hopefully you can see my mouse. Right here is the front office of the school. You see quite a bit of roof damage, and I'm going to show you some surveillance video from inside that here in a second. Again, here's the area that you would essentially walk into to get into the school. Straight on is the entrance, the main entrance. Here to the left is the old theater entrance. So here's one of the video cameras out in front of the school. Again, it's nighttime, so you're not going to see a whole lot, but it'll just give you a perspective on how quickly this hits, what the winds are doing in the storm, and you'll watch all the debris start flying around. Again, it's nighttime, it's hard to see a whole lot, but I think you get a picture that there's just a lot of debris blowing around. So here's just inside the main entry doors to the school. Watch the wind start buckling a little bit. Again, this is the older portion of the school now that we're looking at. So built, you said, in the 70s. So slightly older construction. Again, the tornado pretty much parts right through here. The roof starts collapsing there. I think I cut that a little bit short. Here's inside the school now. This is the front desk. This is pretty remarkable footage here. So you see the windows blew out, the roof kind of caved in there, and fortunately no one was sitting in there at the time when the tornado struck, because I think they would have had some awful impacts. Just a few seconds, just look what happened there in a few seconds. Yeah, you definitely don't want to be, this is why we tell people stay away from external windows and walls and things like that, because you saw the force of that wind and all that debris that got blown through. So we're going to go to the Leonard Price Theater, which is right here, so just southwest of the front entrance. You see quite a bit of roof damage there as well. We're flying over it. Again, this is the roof there of the theater that we'll be looking at. You can see most of the roof is missing here. Again, this is a large span ceiling. These are areas that we don't want students going to as a place of safety. Gymnasiums, auditoriums, cafeterias, because they have these large span roofs up there, make them more susceptible to collapse, essentially. So here's the doors coming into the auditorium or into the theater, the external doors, and you'll see what happens here in a second. So you see outside, the wind's starting to pick up a little bit, and there's debris just coming right through the door, and there's a still of what that door essentially looked like after. You see all the splatter on the door, and the debris went right through the glass windows. There's, looking in that little lobby area there, and all the debris and all the damage. Some more look of it there. And now we'll take a look. We're going to say, so that's the doors into the internal doors into the theater here, and I'll have the next picture, I believe, is inside the theater itself. And you'll see how the roof essentially just kind of came in. So certainly not a safe place if anyone was in there at the time. Now going to the library again. The library is off to the northwest a little bit more now. Almost all the roof was missing there. Another large span type ceiling area where you wouldn't want to locate students for a place of safety. For this reason, again, looking overhead through the drone footage, you'll see, just huge gaping hole. Most of the roof is missing over the library of the school. And here are some pictures from inside. Again, just a tremendous amount of debris, sheetrock and roofing material. All the windows are essentially blown out there. So just tremendous amount of damage inside that library there. Now we're going to go to the drama. I believe it's the drama room, right, Dr. Robbins, in the front left here where we have the collapse wall. So yep. I'm going to show you some drone footage or some pictures here. This part of the school, the wall actually collapsed, and there's a big gaping hole in the side of the school. So tornado crossed through here. Right here, you'll see the wall that collapsed. It was the drama room at the time. Large portion of the roof is missing. And there you can see the whole wall was missing. A lot of the ceiling kind of came in. This would have been probably one of the hardest hit rooms in the school. That right there, what we looked at, would have certainly been one of the hardest hit, I think, parts of the school, just in terms of classrooms and the amount of damage that was in there. And note, I'm going to show this later, the newer auditorium through this wall here, right on the other side, the newer build auditorium, and we'll see how that fared here shortly. But this footage we're going to go to now is actually on the hallway just inside of this classroom, I believe, if I had my locations correct.
Yes.
And you'll see the wind certainly pick up, but despite all the damage that happened in that classroom, you see some debris come out from the bottom of the door, and that is about it. So any students in this hallway seeking shelter during a tornado would have been perfectly safe. We're in that classroom. It could have been potentially a deadly situation. So here's another still shot. A lot of water on the ground. There's some debris, but certainly very survivable. So it just really shows that interior hallways make a difference. Here's a newer auditorium, a lot of debris on there, but you know, the windows, the doors are actually fairly well intact given the amount of damage on the older part of the school just across from this. Some broken windows. I think they were double pane, so I don't think only one or two of them actually might have been broken all the way through if I remember correctly. But most of the windows actually withstood the impact from the debris, which is pretty remarkable. They just had some of the ceiling tiles come in a bit in the hallway here in the newer part of the auditorium, as you can see there. But for the most part, the newer construction fared fairly well. So you can see the difference in construction type really makes a difference in surviving these tornadoes. Now we're going to go inside some of the hallways. You still here are two windows on both sides of the hallway, and we're going to watch. You can see the ceiling tiles start to lift. Doors blow open, exterior doors blow open, the windows shatter as debris comes in. So while the hallways and the protected part of the school without windows did fairly well, you certainly don't want to put any students in a hallway where there's a lot of windows or exterior doors. If you do, you want to make sure they're well away from that for that very reason. All that debris just came in, the windows blew in, the doors opened up. Here's another hallway. You can see the door frame actually just bent. This whole door or window here kind of came in, and all the debris out in this area just outside the building. So again, it's a matter of keeping students away from doors and windows for this very reason. The other parts of the hallway had a lot of water, some ceiling tiles, but students were survived fine, I believe, in most of the hallways if they were away from doors and windows. Here's just another example. You can see out those doors, all the debris out there. And we were very fortunate, and the school was very nice to let us be some of the first ones in after the engineers cleared us to go in there and look, and we're able to see firsthand what it looked like. A lot of water and obviously a lot of damage, but this one hallway here was hit pretty hard. You can see there are some exterior doorways, I believe, here, and you'll see in a second how the suction essentially from the pressure and the wind just blows everything down that hallway. So again, if students are in the hallways, we always want them down, covering their heads for that reason. They would survive here fine, but there'd be some debris and everything else getting blown around, and that's the reason why if they get down along the wall, cover their head. Most of the time, you know, they'll be okay for this very reason. I think these are great examples. So you can see all the debris coming down. So you want to keep them away from those exterior doors, but again, if they're protecting their head with something, you know, there might be some injuries, but I think it's certainly survivable, as bad as it looks. And the next one here is just some of the classrooms. Get an idea of some of the damage that these classrooms took. So here, you know, the windows were blown out, ceiling tiles missing. Again, the hallways certainly look to be in better shape than some of the exterior classrooms. So here's the cafeteria is on. I'm not sure, Dr. Robbins, which of the two buildings it was. I don't remember. Was it the one on the left here or the one on the right? I kind of put the label on both.
It was the one on the left.
On the left here? Okay, so this is the cafeteria here. So it's a little bit away from the direct path of the tornado. It's a little bit removed. Damage wasn't nearly as significant, but again, as you mentioned, I wasn't aware at the time. This is slightly newer construction up this way as well. This part of the school up here on top. So maybe the construction type also played a slight role in how well the cafeteria fared, but we have some video from in there. So here's outside, and actually on this one, I believe you might be able to see the tornado at night in the upper left. If you look closely, it's not ideal, but I believe this is the one. I was kind of able to see it a little bit coming through here in a second. You'll start seeing, if you look up this way, I could be wrong. It's dark, it's grainy, but I think, give it another second, I think you start seeing it. Might be right after this. Yeah, it's right in here. You can see the winds right there. See the tornado? That's probably the best I was able to tell from external cameras of actually seeing the tornado. And so here's inside the cafeteria. So there, the window failed. Obviously, some debris came in, moved the table around. The winds obviously picked up pretty good inside the cafeteria here, but damage overall was fairly minimal compared to the rest of the school. And then the bus lots on the other side of the school here, the northeast side of the school, and this is remarkable. You actually could see the path of right where the tornado exited the school and left all this debris. And all these buses here, these two that were turned, were all lined up with these others right along the curb here, and they were all moved by the force of the wind of the tornado as it came through. And of course, it's buffering here. So yeah, you're looking at all the damage to the buses here. There was a little, it's like a shooting range or something up here, Dr. Robbins, I believe, a building or structure that got destroyed.
Yeah, that's where our JROTC program is. And the one thing you can't see in this picture, all the windows were blown out of these buses. And the buses that were moved were from the tornado, but there were rooftop units that were actually lifted and thrown through several other buses as well.
Of course, it wants to buffer on me when I need to show something, so let's do it a second here. Yeah, this is quite a bit of damage to all these buses out there. Almost every single one of them had some kind of damage to it, if I remember correctly. And then, yeah, you can see there was an open field, so we kind of ended it right after this. It could have maybe went on a little bit longer, but again, here's all the damage, the debris that was kind of left behind as it left the school and went onto that bus lot. Pretty remarkable. There you can see another still shot of the buses turned and crashed into each other, essentially. Remarkable seeing, you know, buses are heavy. We all, you know, it's hard to imagine the force of wind being able to do this. And look at all the splatter and debris on the side of the buses. All the windows, again, like Dr. Robbins had mentioned, all the windows are broken out. Notice there's a piece of plywood in here, and I still have no idea how that got in there. You'll see right here, it's located outside. I don't know how it even got in there like that. It's sitting next to the seats, next to the window. It's just remarkable what this tornado was able to do. So I'm going to show this here, not to make it complicated. This is the main track of the tornado, but we noticed an area of straight line wind damage more on this side of the school, right by the baseball fields. We're not sure quite yet if this was strong inflow into the tornado or what we call a rear flank downdraft, which are winds that come around the back end of a tornado and produce a lot of damage as well, a little bit more in a straight path or maybe slightly divergent. But we had a lot of trees here that were all snapped in the same direction or slightly divergent away from each other. And there were a couple of collapsed light poles here, and up this way was a Connex shipping container lifted and tossed about 50 yards, and it takes a lot of wind to do that. Again, some of this could have been more the direct circulation of the tornado. Some of it might have been more the straight line winds. It's hard to really differentiate. We kind of counted this all as tornado damage in here, but it's some pretty remarkable wind damage, even up this way outside of the direct path of the tornado. So I'm going to play some of that now. Okay, so here is some baseball field footage. Again, on the left here, I think you can see a little bit of the tornado coming through, or at least some of the winds getting picked up, not quite as evident. But if you look on the left, these light stands here will break as one of these two actually snapped. That one right there. See how it just snapped down? And doing our assessment, taking a look for those light stands to come down, it typically takes EF2 strength winds to knock that down. I believe it was something over 115 or 120 miles is what you would typically expect to knock those light stands down. That helped us come up with our rating. Here are a bunch of snap trees. And you can see some of the concrete blocks were knocked down along the baseball field. Again, here is the broken light stands. Again, that's representative of EF2 damage, and that's what we essentially came up with for the school. So it takes a lot of wind to not, to snap those down. And two of them were down. And here's that shipping container. You see this green awning? It was located just next to that. This is how far it got tossed. And I did a little research, and it takes a lot of wind to do that apparently as well. to move something like that, which was kind of consistent with the EF2 rating we came up with. So that's it for the video. I am going to pass it on to Dr. Robbins to speak about. Dr. Robbins, do you want me to step through the presentation, or do you want to take control of the screen?
No, if you don't mind me just asking you to advance to the slide,
Sure.
next slide.
I will do that, and we'll take questions at the end. Oops, wait, hold on, I hit the wrong thing. Okay, sir, it's all yours.
Awesome, thank you. And I just want to say thank you to John and the folks at the Weather Service for the invitation to talk about our response to this event. It's obviously not something as a school district that we expect to happen. We do try to plan for it, but you know, it was really one of those things that we're just very blessed that tornado hit on the weekend when the building was unoccupied. So I'm just going to talk through how we responded, some of the people I felt like were key, and what allowed us to be as successful as we thought we could be in providing a learning environment for our students post-tornado. But immediately we activated our emergency response plan. Every school district has one. And so we started making phone calls and alerting all those folks and partners that we have that we knew were going to be essential for us to respond and recover. You know, the first thing always is safety. You know, safety was a key topic for us, and it was really our focal point because you just didn't know what you're going to run into. So things like having the utilities shut down so that we didn't have any unintended electrocutions and things like that were really important. One of the things I've always experienced over the years when you have any type of event, whether it's natural disaster, active shooter, or whatever, is you have multiple agencies that will converge on the school, and there is kind of like this who's in charge, you know, atmosphere. And a large part of it is when you're talking about a school, everybody has just a different sense of expectation and wanting to help. And so I served as the incident commander on the site just to establish basically our operating procedures, and then we delegated things off to the appropriate agencies. But in doing so, we were able to create and set up, and you can see it in this slide in the bottom right-hand corner, a command center that we could operate out of. And fortunately, I have a background in emergency response. I do that in the military, so we really tried to model it the same way and make sure everybody was communicating. Felt like communication was key. So we knew how we're going to mobilize, what logistic supplies we're going to need. Obviously, there's going to be a cost associated with this, so we had to alert our insurance company and providers right out of the gates. Site safety was of obvious concern. This is a rural school district, and anytime there is an event like this, you've got onlookers and people that are just, they have natural curiosity, and so we needed to secure the site. Communications in that part of the county are sometimes a little difficult. You can't always get Wi-Fi access. Your cell phones will drop dead. So we needed to make sure we had good, clear communication lines set up. We wanted to set up timelines in which certain metrics were achieved so that we could move forward in this event. And then obviously, again, being a school district, we knew we were going to have several VIPs that were going to want to visit the site. I mean, within 24 hours, I had talked to the Speaker of the House, I talked to the state superintendent, the governor called me on my cell phone. And so that was another piece that you just wanted to make sure that we had organized and coordinated. Sometimes, you know, an overabundance of help can make the problem more difficult than more helpful. Go to the next slide. So keys to success: relationships, communication right out of the gates. We have great relationships with our community, and we communicate with them really frequently on any type of event that may or may not occur. We just recently conducted a tabletop exercise, so we do go through the whole ICS protocol to try to work with them to make sure that if something does happen, that it's kind of seamless. But if you just look at the community and state response we had, First of all, I'll just tell you, it was amazing. It was incredible, not just because we had so many people on site, but how well they worked together and how well they were able to manage, each other's presence and not getting one another's way, and just be supportive. So I just listed it here. I'm not going to go through the whole list, and I surely hope I didn't leave anybody off. But in the county itself, our county was just absolutely incredible. And so, it's a shout out to them. I know Kershaw Health, I think you're on the call, and our Kershaw County Emergency Management team, again, our relationships with them made our response just that much easier. But we had the Department of Ed came out on site. You can see one of the pictures here where Speaker Lucas was on site. And again, everybody willing to just do what they could to assist us. The Weather Service assistance really was important because it helped us with our insurance company. Seeing some of the footage and the categorization of the tornado itself was going to allow us to proceed in how our recovery efforts transpired when we went to remodel, rebuild, or restore that building. Okay, John, if you want to go to the next slide. So lessons learned, and this is kind of the part I wanted to really focus most of the time on, and that is, when we look at an event like this, after the event, you want to go back while it's fresh in your mind, and you want to look at what are the things that occurred that you want to sustain. What are those things that you learned from this event that you want to improve on, that you can get better as a school district, that you can share with your peers and your colleagues? The sustains were easy to identify. Our partnerships, our county and state partnerships were, like I said, they were incredible. It was amazing to have so many people willing to pick up the call to help and do the things that we needed to do to respond, to try to provide opportunities for our kids that we're going to have to locate in a different location so we can provide educational opportunities for them, but then just our recovery efforts with the buildings. Sustain, we definitely, our preparation efforts were important in our response, and the tabletop exercises that we have, we'll continue to do those. We felt like that helped us as a collective county team to respond. And then the final one is our finances. So, this is obviously going to be covered under our insurance umbrella. However, they don't cut checks right away. And so without a cash balance to put the bill, at least to start out, we would really have struggled. So we were able to do all these things and not ask for any assistance from our community, and really allowed us to start our recovery efforts right away. What would we improve? Well, depending on location, it really could change, the scenario around these events. But because this was a rural site, and again, when you have a natural disaster like this, you got people that are just curious. They want to see. So one of the things that we identified as an improved category under safety was we would immediately put up fencing to secure the perimeter. Again, that's one, to keep people out. It's also to maintain safety so no one comes onto the site and, heaven forbid, something bad happens to them. So that's something we knew we needed to improve on in the future. Emergency communication tools, we have invested some money in some more high-powered radios that will not be reliant on necessarily Wi-Fi, that will allow us to communicate a little better. We were in decent shape, but we still needed to invest some money. And then the other thing, and this is something I mentioned to John, was, as we looked at the footage and we evaluated and compared that to our response protocols, there are some things that we do in the school district in terms of safety preparation that we determine may not be in our best interest, that may not be the safest course of action for our students when we're responding to things such as a tornado. So naturally, we just go into a hallway. And you did see some footage where some of the hallways were protected. But what we have found is, and just doing a little more research on it, hallways can become wind tunnels. So you really need to look at which hallways you're going to utilize as evacuation locations for your students, and not just choose any hallway, because some of those hallways, if we had an occupied building, could have been detrimental to the health and well-being of our students and our staff. So we are looking at that in every single one of our structures and facilities to make sure that we're using hallways that have, they don't have the roof square footage that we saw in some of these cases, that they are in more smaller locations. You know, what you're trying to do a lot of times in a hallway when you evacuate students, you're trying to put a large number of students into a location. So you look for large locations. What we have deemed would be probably more appropriate is to break that off into chunks and look at chunks of our building. And that means it's going to be, it's going to take more time, you know, to plan that and to organize it and to manage it. But at the end of the day, it's going to be safer for our kids if and when this would ever happen again. So those were the improves. Those were the sustains. Again, blessed that no one was in the building, not even a maintenance worker or custodian when this happened. And then blessed that we had so much support when we responded. Every one of our school buses was disabled to some capacity, whether it was blown out windows or completely destroyed by the tornado. And we had buses rolling in on Sunday evening so that we could provide transportation to our students on Monday, and they didn't miss a day of school because we put them in an alternate location. And again, none of those things happened without the amount of community support we received. And I think that's the last slide, John. I'm happy to answer any questions.